Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're looking into crypto and free speech and this court case that's kind of blowing up right now. A lot of people might recognize the name Richard Hart. He's created HEX and PulseChain and PulseX and
quite a few projects. Yeah, he's been busy.
But he's kind of in the hot seat right now with the SEC.
He is, yeah.
And they are saying that he's been violating securities laws.
Yeah, this case is really interesting. It's kind of pushing the boundaries of how we think about investments. And a lot of it comes back to the sacrifice concept that he was using.
Right. So the SEC's basic argument is that Richard Hart violated U.S. securities laws. But the interesting part of this story is the fact that he was telling his followers to sacrifice cryptocurrency in support of this PulseChain project. So he's saying, send your cryptocurrency to this digital wallet, knowing that you will never see it again.
Yeah, it's sort of like a digital offering plate where you're not just dropping in a couple of dollars. You know, you're sending, in some cases, large amounts of cryptocurrency. And the defense is that it's all about free speech, which is pretty interesting.
So is he saying that it's like a charitable donation?
It's interesting. It's even more interesting, I think. The analogy that his lawyer used was burning a flag, that it's a form of political expression that's protected by the First Amendment. But the SEC is coming back and saying, wait a minute, this looks a lot like an investment scheme.
So where does the SEC get the idea that this is an investment scheme? Did he promise people something in return for this sacrifice?
Well, that's a good question, because while he's emphasizing that the money is gone, you know, that this is a sacrifice, you're not getting anything back, he also did talk about potential benefits to participating in the project. And so the SEC is saying that that created this expectation of profit, which makes it look a lot more like an investment.
So it's not a clear cut, like I'm sending money to a cause or something.
Yeah.
It's more like there's a little bit of a gray area here.
Exactly. It's definitely in this gray area. And to make matters worse, while he's telling all of his followers, you know, to sacrifice for the greater good of this project, court documents reveal that he was spending millions of dollars from that very project to buy luxury cars and a black diamond.
Oh, wow. So if he's, telling people to sacrifice for this project, you would think that he would be living a little bit more modestly. Mm-hmm. What did the judge have to say about this?
It's interesting. You can almost hear the judge's skepticism in the transcript of this hearing. They even ask, why would people send money knowing that it would be lost? They clearly weren't buying the whole purely altruistic argument, especially with those luxury purchases coming to light.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. How is the SEC even able to bring this case in a U.S. court? I mean, because he lives in Finland.
Right. This is a very interesting legal question, like where does this case even belong? So the SEC is arguing that even though Hart lives in Finland, he was actively targeting U.S. investors. He had an online presence, YouTube videos. He was attending conferences in the U.S.
So, I mean, they're saying that his activities online and these physical appearances that he made in the United States mean that he knew that he was engaging with the U.S. market.
Exactly. And to make their argument even stronger, they point out that he even mentioned this thing called the Howey test in some of his statements.
Okay, so for our listeners who aren't lawyers, what is the Howey test and why is this significant?
So the Howey test is basically the legal test to figure out if something is an investment or not. And so by referencing that test, the SEC is saying, well, he clearly understood that he was kind of walking this legal tightrope here.
So it's almost like he tipped his hand a little bit, saying like, hey, I know that this could be considered an investment under U.S. law.
Right. But of course, his lawyers have a counter argument, and they're saying, well, just because some Americans participated, that doesn't automatically give a U.S. court jurisdiction. These statements were globally accessible. He wasn't specifically targeting U.S. investors.
So this is like this legal tug of war where they're both trying to pull the case into their own territory.
Exactly. And then it gets even trickier because you have cryptocurrency here, and we're talking about the blockchain aspect of it. And, blockchains are decentralized. There's no central authority or location controlling them.
Right. So it's kind of like trying to pin down a cloud. How do you even figure out where this belongs?
Yeah, it's a real headache for the courts. Yeah. So the SEC is trying to use this previous case they won against Binance, which is a centralized crypto exchange. And they're saying, well, the location of the U.S. investors was enough to establish jurisdiction there because these transactions were facilitated on servers in the U.S.
So they're trying to take that logic and apply it to this case with Richard Hart?
Exactly. But his lawyers are saying that this is a total different thing. The blockchain itself doesn't live in the U.S., so it's much murkier to say that there's jurisdiction here.
So it sounds like the judge has a lot to unpack here. Did we get any sense from the transcript which way they're leaning on this?
Well, the judge was definitely grilling both sides, asking these tough questions, like where does the blockchain live? And at what point does a transaction become irrevocable?
Yeah. I mean, these are really difficult questions. And it just shows how, with this new technology and the existing laws, it's really hard to apply these things to each other.
It really is. It's a great case to look at to see exactly these challenges that are coming up in the crypto space.
Yeah. This is a very important case, and it could set a lot of precedent for the future of cryptocurrency regulation. But we've still got to figure out this central question. Was this sacrifice actually an investment contract? And if it was, what does that mean for Richard Hart?
Exactly.
So we've got this legal battle going on, a judge that's not quite sure what to make of all of this, and a whole lot of cryptocurrency just hanging in the balance. But the big question is, was this sacrifice even an investment to begin with?
And that is the core of Richard Hart's defense. His lawyers are saying there was no contract, no agreement between him and the people who sent him crypto.
So there's no give and take, you give me this, I'll give you that, in an investment.
Exactly. And they point to the SEC's case against Telegram, where there were very clear promises of future actions, the release of tokens in exchange for investment. It was a much more traditional setup.
Okay, so how is this different?
Well, they're saying basically he created this digital wallet and said, if you believe in free speech and blockchain, send your crypto here. No strings attached, no promises of specific returns.
So donating to a political campaign or something, or to a nonprofit.
Exactly. And they even argue that he could have walked away from the entire PulseChain project the day after launch and not technically breached any contract.
But wouldn't that leave everybody who sacrificed high and dry?
Well, that's what the SEC is arguing. They're saying even if there wasn't a formal written contract, Hart's actions and statements, particularly those that hinted at potential rewards, created this implicit expectation of profit.
So yeah, it's like those lucky you comments we were talking about earlier.
It could come back to bite him.
Yeah. And remember, the judge even pointed out that Hart was promoting HEX at a conference even after the sacrifice phase. So that could suggest a continuing obligation to those who contributed.
Okay, so we've got Hart on one side saying this is all about free speech, no expectation of financial gain. And the SEC's on the other side saying, well, not so fast. Your actions and words tell a different story. This is getting complicated.
Yeah. And don't forget, those millions of dollars in luxury purchases he made using funds from the sacrifice wallet.
Yeah, if it's all about free speech and the blockchain, could he have made his point without the Rolex and the McLaren?
It definitely makes you question his motives, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the court to decide, was this a selfless act or a cleverly disguised investment scheme?
It's like a legal thriller, international intrigue, cutting-edge technology, and a charismatic figure at the center of it all. What does all of this mean for the future of cryptocurrency? Well, I think it really highlights the challenges, applying these traditional financial regulations to the decentralized world of blockchain. It's like we have to rethink our definitions of what an investment is and how do you protect investors in this kind of new landscape.
So what happens if the SEC wins? What kind of impact could that have?
If they win, it could give them a really powerful tool to regulate a lot of activities in the crypto space that weren't traditionally considered investments. Things like crowdfunding and these initial coin offerings and decentralized autonomous organizations. All of that stuff could potentially fall under the SEC's purview.
And what if Hart wins?
Well, then it could embolden others to structure their projects in similar ways, really blurring that line between a genuine contribution to a cause and an investment disguised as something else. It could create this Wild West scenario in the crypto world with limited investor protection.
So this case really have the potential to shape the future of this whole industry.
Absolutely. And it really raises some profound questions about how technology, finance, and the law, how these things are all interacting in this new world.
It really feels like we're looking into the future of finance right now, and it's a little bit blurry. I mean, where do we even begin to draw lines, with this new decentralized world?
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I think this case really shows us the growing pains of this new crypto industry. On the one hand, you need regulations to protect people and to make sure everything's fair, but you don't want to stifle innovation with all these rules.
Right. So how do you find that balance? I mean, how do we balance innovation and investor protection in this new space that's changing so rapidly?
Yeah. That is the big question. This case might actually force lawmakers to step in and create clear guidelines for how to deal with blockchain technology. I mean, imagine a framework that's actually designed for these decentralized systems where these old ideas like jurisdiction and contracts have to be reinterpreted.
Right. I mean, that would be huge. It would give so much clarity to, developers and investors.
Yeah.
But until that happens, we're stuck with this, legal tug of war that's playing out right now.
And that's why this case is so important, because it's not just about Richard Hart and his sacrifice, It's about setting precedents that could have a ripple effect throughout this whole crypto world.
It's a lot to think about. What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners? What should people remember from this whole discussion?
Well, I think first off, it's good to remember that blockchain technology is still new. We're all kind of figuring this out as we go, including the regulators. And that means that we should expect to see more of these legal gray areas come up and a lot more uncertainty, too, in the years ahead.
So buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
Exactly. And the second takeaway, I think, is that, this case shows us how important it is to do your research, especially in the crypto world. Before you jump into anything, do your homework, understand the risks, and don't just take somebody's word for it, even if they seem successful or whatever.
That's good advice for any investment, I would say. Don't just follow the hype.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, I think this case shows us how much potential this technology has to change our legal and financial systems. We're just seeing the beginning of this, This technology is going to challenge all these old ideas that we have about contracts, property rights, the role of government.
It's pretty exciting and a little bit scary, too.
Yeah.
We're at the beginning of this big change, and this case is giving us a front row seat to all this legal and financial wrangling that's happening.
Yeah, and here's a final thought for you and for everyone listening. What if this idea of sacrificing cryptocurrency for a social or political cause catches on? I mean, how would that change how we think about, investing and donations and activism?
That's a really interesting question, because it really blurs the lines between, making money and doing good. And it can completely change how we think about, charity and political campaigns and stuff like that.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting about this whole discussion. We're not just talking about this one legal case. We're talking about this fundamental shift in how we interact with money and technology and with each other.
Yeah. It's a brave new world out there, and this case is just a taste of what's coming. We'll definitely keep following this story and let you know what happens. In the meantime, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, the future of finance is being written right now.